Hey everyone, I get asked quite often what size enclosure, tank, setup, cage, whatever the word you want to use for my particular pet reptile. And so I decided that I'm going to go through and give my opinion on what I think the minimum size for some of the most popular pet reptile cages, enclosures, whatever may have you are. So again, my opinion, not proven whatever it is, but I'm going to give justification for that as well as an example of what I think might be a better choice above and beyond the bare minimum. So, before we get going, I just want to quickly bring up, you'll probably notice a bit of a change in some of the more recent videos where I'm talking about like our new babies being born this year. We're down here in the main snake room, and that's kind of where I want to start doing more of the videos. But with that being said, lighting we're still kind of working on, the setup we're still kind of working on. There's probably, until we dial in, maybe a little bit of background noise from like Renoir's tank or whatever may have you. So hold tight on us for that one. We're working on it. We're getting there. So getting right into it, of the five different, the most popular pet reptiles are there. So when you first think of, we'll immediately just go off the bat and we'll talk about ball pythons. So right here is Colorado. She's our pastel highway, who is getting close to size and will probably be going this fall for this upcoming season, and hopefully we'll get some really cool stuff out of her. But when we first think about ball pythons, immediately everyone thinks of is racks or tanks. That's like kind of the main thing. We're not going to have the conversation about racks in this video because that's an entirely different subject. Racks are not necessarily the best for everything and really are more for our convenience. But I'm talking about if you have one or two or just a few pet reptiles, what I think a bare minimum cage is. So off the bat, I'm going to be talking about adults, full-grown animals. So like this big or bigger for a ball python. We're talking 1,500 grams and up. So for an animal like this that theoretically can get over 4.5 to 5 feet long, sometimes bigger, for single animals, I think for an adult, the base size should be something like a 75-gallon aquarium. Something that's at least 4 feet long, about 1.5 to 2 feet deep. And I think that is a good base thing for a single ball python. I know they have the reputation, and I like to poke fun at it just like everybody else too, about them being pet rocks and they don't move a whole lot. And that is somewhat true, but that's mostly because they don't really move a whole lot when actually working with them. Left to their own devices, and more than likely, probably when you're asleep, these guys will cruise. That's actually why, for my larger ball pythons, I have 4 foot long and by 1.5 foot wide tubs in a rack system. Because they're so large, I want to give them more space to spread out as well as making it more convenient for me. But with that being said, that way you can give them more room for them to utilize. If you give them a branch, if you give them a vertical hide, they will sometimes take advantage of that, as well as that gives it enough space to properly thermoregulate. I'm not going to talk too much about husbandry in the video. I'm mostly just talking about enclosure or cage size minimums, just kind of period. I know the base that they like to go off of is, as long as 2 sides are the length of the animal. So if, it's a square like my little notebook right here that I write everything down for the videos, if this and this are the length of the snake, then that's the minimum. I think that's okay, and that works for like racks and stuff, but again, I think like a 75-gallon tank for a ball python, a single ball python, as an adult is good. Personally, I think like a 4x2 melamine enclosure or a 4x2 PVC cage is a little bit better. So at least 4 feet long, 2 feet deep, and then 1.5 to 2 feet tall. That way, again, enough size for proper thermoregulation, plenty of room to stretch out, and for them to utilize, even if they're going to spend most of the time in a hide or two. But again, just, my opinion. Moving right along, we'll go with the most popular pet reptile, or pet lizard, and that's probably the bearded dragon. So bearded dragons, I don't know if they're necessarily the best beginner, but they're certainly one of the most popular. And I think a good minimum size enclosure is, again, a 75-gallon tank. A lot of people say like a 40, and honestly, I don't think that's enough room. These guys do require very high basking temps, but they don't have to be under that all the time. And to put them under that can cause, undue stress and harm to them. So a 75-gallon aquarium or equivalent size cage or whatever, once again, will hopefully give it enough room so that way you can properly give it enough room for a high basking spot and then enough for like a cooler, more moderately tempt little hide or area of the tank for like one side versus the other. I think that, again, a 4x2 might be a little bit better for a bearded dragon. That way you can give them even more space. They will absolutely climb if you can give them a very large branch or like a small tree or something, or bush with big sturdy branches that they can crawl onto. Give them plenty of places to dig, because bearded dragons do like to dig, and give them deep substrate and they can dig through stuff like that. So we'll just bounce back and forth between lizard and snake. So after that, we'll move on to corn snakes. So when you think of the most popular pet snake, it's either going to be a ball python like Colorado, or a corn snake like Sierra, or one of our other corn snakes. So with a corn snake, I think that a 40 is a good minimum. And I'm still honestly a little on the fence about that. So they're not nearly as heavy bodied as ball pythons, just period. They usually only get about 4 feet, 4.5 feet long, and that's a good sized big girl corn snake. But they are more active than ball pythons, just period, during the day and the night. They are more active in general, and they will absolutely take advantage of all of the space that you give them. So even though they're a little bit slender body, a little bit smaller, and a 40 is a minimum, I think something that, so a 40, when you think of like a 40 gallon, so like a 40 breeder, or like a front opening one, like a big Exoterra, I think something that still is at least 3 feet long is better, but maybe like a vision cage, or again, one of those PVC enclosures that's 3 to 4 feet long, a foot, like a foot and a half to 2 feet deep. And then again, I'm kind of sticking with this like 4x2 kind of a thing, but these are a little bit bigger reptiles that I think would be better for a corn snake. And this also could probably be used equivalently with similar sized king snakes and milk snakes. So like a California king snake or a Nelson's milk snake, they could also use an enclosure like that. That way you can give them plenty of room to climb, to hide, to bury, everything like that, and they will absolutely take advantage of that space. So I think a 40 Exoterra is minimum, but honestly, if you can go bigger and better, I think you absolutely should. Moving along from that, let's talk about, a Crested Gecko. Crested geckos are a little bit hard. They are some of the reptiles you can actually keep communally in small groups of girls or in trios. I personally will keep 2 females in one enclosure, and then a male will bounce back and forth. And I think a minimum, and even then, it's a little is, kind of the standard Crested Gecko little thing for a single male or a single female, and that's all you do, and you heavily plant it, and you give them plenty of places to hide and stuff like that. It's essentially the equivalent of like a 20-gallon stood up. I think that a larger tank, like an 18 by 18 by 24, is probably a little bit better. Or actually probably like somewhere in between there is a good for one individual Crested Gecko. But I keep pairs of females in those 18 by 18 by 24s because I think that's good for the two, and then I'll keep individual males in those smaller 18 by 18 by 12s. So that's, I think, a good minimum, but I think the 18-18-24s, or, Lord, I can't remember the Exoterra, like what do they call it? I think it's like a mid-tall or something. So, there's like the little one, and then there's the larger one, and there's like the skyscrapers that everyone knows about, the skyscrapers that they keep like lychees and stuff like that in. I think that would be really cool for a Crested Gecko if you just have a couple, but I think an 18 by 18, or like say a 40-gallon breeder that is propped up on its side, and there are a few companies out there that make these conversion kits. You see them a lot of for like 10s and 20s, but I know they make them for 40s too. I think that'd be really cool for like a very nice, heavily planted, bioactive enclosure for a Crested Gecko. I think that'd be really cool. How many was that? 1, 2, 3, 4. So then the last one is the Leopard Gecko. So Leopard Gecko, it competes with the bearded dragon, probably being the most popular pet lizard in probably the world, but definitely in America. And leopard and fat tails probably fall into this too, although they usually don't get as big as some of the different leopard gecko species that we have. I think a 20-gallon aquarium is good for a single leopard gecko. I know a lot of people can keep them in 10s, but I think a 20 is good for one because, again, it's good for thermal regulation. It gives them plenty of space. They like to dig. They like to hide. That way you can give them multiple hiding spots. You can give them a single nice basking spot, provide them places even with UVB because they can benefit from UVB, and then plenty of places to hide away from that. That way you can have multiple hides, warm and humid, because, leopard geckos, just like every other reptile, Uromastyx slightly being a little bit of an exception, and some of like the sand skinks and stuff, but those are going to be a little bit more beneficial for them for, again, proper thermal regulation and enough room for them to move around. I think that a 40 might be a better choice eventually, again, only if you have a couple, if you have like one pet and that's your buddy. A 40-gallon is a little bit better because, again, it just gives them more places. It gives them places to kind of climb. And I'm not talking like they're going to be perched up like a leopard, like a crested gecko or anything like that. But if you give them some larger logs or bigger rocks, you will absolutely find them perched up and hanging out and basking under those things that, they can be, a foot off the ground of their base thing. If you have a nice, like, kind of easy sloping incline up to that, they will absolutely climb little rock walls and faces, and like the little foam backgrounds, they'll absolutely climb up those too. So I think those are pretty good. And I know there's a lot of other popular pets out there like red-eared sliders and boa constrictors that, and even green iguanas that I think I don't really want to cover too much, because that one's like, honestly, red-eared sliders and green iguanas aren't really the best just kind of pets for most people, period. They get really big. They can be really messy. Sometimes they require custom enclosures. So if you're talking about like a green iguana or something like that, where you're talking like aviaries and custom built things, and then red-eared sliders, like a 40 or 75 gallon is just too small. Honestly, I think like 150 plus gallons for a single red-eared slider with proper filtration is honestly what they need at minimum. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't really want to advocate too much for that, because again, I think there are better alternatives for aquatic turtles, like map turtles or musk turtles, or really any turtle with pond in it isn't really the best for that. And then green iguanas, again, we can easily pick up the little ones really cheap, really small, but they very quickly outgrow all those little enclosures, and we're talking about big ones. You know what? Screw it. We'll throw in number 6. We'll do the Red Tail Boa Constrictor. So boa imperators and the constrictors, the true red tails. I think that as an adult, for a single pet, a 6-foot enclosure is really good. They do get much longer than these guys. If you give them, a 6x2, then you can provide them a place for a perch or sorry, Colorado, or a place for them to, perch out and branch up. They won't perch like a carpet or a green tree python, but they will absolutely take advantage and climb up. And if you give them like an actual shelf, they'll hang out on those shelves. If you give them a hide, they'll still use their hides. I have a fully grown adult Guyana boa who uses a hide in her 6-foot enclosure. So I think that's good minimum for a single animal. And there's exceptions and special conditions for things. Like I have a rescue leopard gecko with MBD who, honestly, if I gave her the 40, yeah, she would use it, but I think she's okay getting along with what she does. You can have exceptions of like, you can get a, sub-Saharan ball python that's over 6 feet long, and maybe you want to put that in a 6-foot enclosure, and that'd be really cool too, because then you have this really cool decked out enclosures. And again, we're not talking about breeders. We're not talking about the people who are providing the reptiles for people to enjoy as reptile pets, as what is very quickly starting to become almost companion animals. In equivalent thereof. But we're talking about, this is my pet. I invested. I wanted to get one ball python that's really pilly. I really like the highway ball pythons. This is my pet. I'm going to put it in a 4, 5, 6-foot enclosure and give it a whole bunch of stuff and give it lots of interaction and time out of the enclosure with me. That's really what we're talking about here. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for some of the suggestions that I made, but honestly, I don't think any of them are really bad. Again, we're talking bare minimum, and again, this is my opinion based on what I've seen other people do, what I've witnessed in my own animals and other animals, what I've read, what I've watched, what I've heard, what I've learned, what I've listened. This is my based opinion of a dude who just really likes reptiles and wants to do the best for them that he can. So again, hopefully you enjoyed the video. You got to take away from something from this. If you have any questions about like other different types of reptiles, I'll give you my best opinion for that. Or if you have your own, just keep it civil. That's all I ask. Just keep it civil. We can all be adults, and we can all be professional and kind and courteous to each other. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about anything like that. Hit me up at jzreptiles@gmail.com, Instagram, Facebook, all of that jazz. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.